Welcome to the Quick History YouTube channel, where we give you informative and exciting information about history in under 15 minutes. Keep in account that every video is out there every Friday, and don't forget to subscribe because we're jumping into the Romanov family. The Romanov family had a reign that went all the way up till 1917 and was about 304 years. But what happened exactly before they stopped being the Tsar and Tsarina of Russia? So Alexander III at some point died and was the father of Nicholas II. And Nicholas II eventually became Tsar from Russia. But to be honest, Alexander really wasn't that keen on him becoming Tsar. He didn't really feel that he had the potential to lead Russia. And eventually his father did had some truth to the saying, because he needed 2 extra ministers to help him to rule Russia. And he wanted to follow his father's idea about autocracy power. And that was something that with the changing Russia wasn't really a good fit. What eventually caused that Nicholas didn't really make the best decisions, because Russia got into 2 different wars during his reign, and they all had terrible results. There was a Russian-Japanese war that was there, and there also was the First World War. So both of them were actually something that the Russians had to endure. Both of them didn't really succeeded well, what also was again a very big hit for the ego of not only the Tsar but also for his people, because if Russia is this strong, why aren't we winning from all of these people? And then again, there were a lot of debts and not really honesty when it comes down to enough food, enough providing your people with everything they need. And maybe even more important, the Tsar really didn't know what was going on, because he was in his beautiful winter palace or other castles, and he couldn't really know what was going on with the Russian people. So all of their pain, sorrow, all of their hopes and hoping that something changes wasn't something he was listening to. So he stayed in a bubble. And what happens when our feelings and our thoughts and our needs left unmet? Well, we go out there to make sure that they will get met, and sometimes we do that in a very pleasant way, and sometimes we do that with violence. And that is exactly what the people of Russia mostly did, and also his own soldiers, because at some point the Tsar's soldiers went against the Tsar and the Tsarina, meaning that the soldiers that he trusted so much and that he thought would never go against him did, and meaning that the revolutionaries even became bigger, and therefore the Tsar and his throne were more in danger. Although things were going bad, Nicholas showed to be a very loving and devoted husband, and he was very good for his kids, Tatiana, Maria, Olga, Anastasia, and Alexei. Alexei was a miracle to come, because they really wanted an heir, a son. But shown often is that when royals go with royals, certain diseases occur due to genetics. And their son Alexei, he got hemophilia, and back in the day hemophilia was a death sentence because they didn't had any medication, meaning that they had an heir, but they didn't know if he would, survive to become 16. So it was something very scary as well, making that these lovely children at the end of the day were still very protected from the outside world and from real Russia. And that was something that also gave a lot of irritation with the public, because they never see those children. They will are very disassociated from the truth. And it wasn't until the children, so the girls, started helping into hospitals as a nurse, that they really saw what was going on with the Russian people. So next to the fact that Nicholas had a country that was actually mad at him and wars that were going bad, and he couldn't understand the country and its people, he also had a child that maybe could be the heir or maybe not. So he and his wife had this anxiety-based way of watching Alexei, because you never know what could happen. And this really had a toll on Alexandra's health, because at the end of the day she was using medication that we could perceive nowadays as drugs to be more calm. And let us not forget that Alexandra eventually had 4 children, or 5 even, and this really had a big toll on her body. And in later pictures you could see she's walking with a cane because often she couldn't stand for prolonged times. So in this nerve-wracking challenge of making sure that the country goes well and making sure that your next heir is alive, Nicholas had a lot of weight on his shoulders. And specifically when it comes down to Alexei, when he would fail, he would bring the best people out there to make sure that he would be safe and the bleeding would stop, but they would give him aspirin, what actually would make the bleeding worse. So Alexandra was so desperate that at some point, via, she heard that there was this great man of God that can help out with this problem, and that man was Rasputin. Calling Rasputin, or should I say Grigory Rasputin, a man of God, does feel very, very strange, because this self-proclaimed holy man, aka monk, wasn't per se your average monk that you are used to. Although a monk, he still was very sexually active and was almost a part of a cult, and still had many lovers, female lovers, that he would encounter at night or in the evening. Next to that, he was married with a woman in Siberia, but he went away for prolonged of times and eventually ended up in St. Petersburg, where he helped out the family of Romanov, the family, to make sure that Alexei would be safe. And at some crazy way, Grigory Rasputin always was there at the right time, at the right place. And that was very much in his advantage, because he could really help Alexei. Meaning that when he had bleedings, Grigory said, let everybody go away and I will fix this boy. And by saying that, he also said stop the medication. So the aspirin went away, and that's why he bleeded less, and that's why he actually cured the boy. So often people think there's some magical, mystical part in this, but he just had very good timing. But of course, for Alexandra, she really thought that this guy was legit. And throughout time, Rasputin had far more and more influences in the Romanov house, making the people actually question him, because often he was away on the streets as well and in bars, and he would drink too much and talk too much, and people would overhear certain things he would say, that he's using these people like a puppets, and he just has the queen around his finger, and that eventually sparked up certain comedy type of cartoons that people would produce to show how he had how would I say, a certain influence on the Tsar and on the Tsarina, meaning that actually he was dictating what was happening to the country and not them, and making this even something more irritable for the Russian society, for the people that were living there, because they just felt that this was one big joke. And talking about right timing, always having luck on your side, at some point Rasputin didn't have this, and in 1916 he got killed by Prince Felix Yusupov and Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich. They actually made a plan together by luring him in their house with some, cake and wine to eat and consume and just have a regular talk, But actually these were contaminated with cyanide, and eventually it really didn't actually hit Rasputin, so it didn't work. The poison didn't work, and for them it was like, oh my god, he really is, a monk. So they took a shotgun and shot him, and at some point he stand up again, and it felt like this man wasn't kill able, but at some point they did, and they killed him. They threw him in the waters, and he was found eventually in the waters, frozen with the shotguns as it is. And a little strange fact is that they cut his genitals, and that is now somewhere on water in a museum to see. But Rasputin eventually was buried, and he was initially first buried at the Winter Palace, and Miss Alexandra had the hardest time to say goodbye to him, because her monk, her basically savior for her child, went away. And a very, specific detail is that Rasputin already said that he was going to die, and it was like something he already had predicted. And this was 1 year before the family, the Romanovs, died. So in 1917, and please keep in mind that the Romanov family has been captured for some time now, by the revolutionaries, and their way of living is becoming, less luxurious every time. So at first they were caught and they still had some decent accommodations, but now it's becoming very, very much grimy and cold, and they're in this house where the windows are painted with whitewash so nobody can see that they're there. And at some point, the war is shifting, and they really have the feeling that the Romanovs can escape again. So the revolutionaries do not want that to happen, because what happened was those officers and those soldiers that were against the Romanovs, their own soldiers, they started their own group and were against the Russian revolutionaries. So there were two groups now, and it was looking like those soldiers from the Romanovs that they were going to free them again. So these Russian revolutionaries made this idea that they were going to bring these people for the last time to a different house, and there was the place that we're going to execute them. And this execution went very, very strange, because at some point they were in a room, and the soldiers needed to grab the shotgun and different type of guns, and it was shoot them, all that. But the thing is that in the meantime that they were there, and mind me, they were there for years, that they were captive under those Russian revolutionaries, they sewed in the diamonds into their clothing, meaning that the moment they got shot, they actually had world's most expensive bulletproof clothing on, and they couldn't get killed just like that. So eventually they needed knives to kill everybody. And it's still something of a debate discussion today, why did they killed everybody, why they only needed to kill the sons. But they were afraid, the Russian revolutionaries, that the women could become queen as well. So at the end of the day, everybody got executed and the bodies were buried nearby. And now there's this specific thing that not everybody's body was found, and that from Anastasia and Alexei wasn't found. And then comes this specific part that I think is beautiful but painful as well, and that is the part of hope. Because somewhere people hope, because of that, the little, Anastasia, that was always very tough, a little bit of a tomboy, very naughty, hopefully escaped and did not, endured all this suffering. And a lot of women came, towards the media saying, I'm Anastasia, or I'm Anastasia. And back in the day, because of not having DNA samples that we could test, or at least that, way of DNA systems, we couldn't say that. But later on, people could discover that all of these people were frauds, and eventually they found their bodies, and we can confirm that everybody of the family is dead, except one auntie that lived and actually fled away. And nowadays you could say that there's still royal family out there from the Romanovs, but it's also somewhat hard to say because they didn't proceed in their work. Because the one that survived was Grand Duchess Olga Alexandrovna of Russia. She was the sis of Nicholas II, aka the Tsar of Russia, or the last Tsar of Russia. And she eventually had a life that in the beginning she really needed to fled of her past, of her history, because she was always in danger. At some point when everything was over and the Russian royal family really wasn't a threat anymore, she could happily live somewhere far away with her true love, and they both died of old age, and she eventually could die in peace. But it was something that actually haunted her royal past, in a negative way, what also shows that being a royal isn't always easy. So guys, this was this quick history about the Romanov family. If you would like to know more, let me know. I will also be leaving links below with some extra additional information, and I hope you enjoyed this episode.